What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Get the Bag podcast. I'm your host, Gladia Castro. Got my co-host, Tim Park. This is
What's
episode
up, fam?
21 of season 2. We have a really exciting topic for you guys, kind of going back to the basics. But before we get into that, don't forget to subscribe, like this episode. We're on here every Wednesday, dropping knowledge. We either have a regular topic, common topic in real estate, or any form of getting money, or we have a guest talking. So today it'll be, we have a really exciting topic to discuss, just common wholesaling questions that come up, especially when you're getting started. And yeah, so I think when we were kind of deciding on what to talk about, being part of a wholesaling community, there's so many questions that come up off top, just in general, even with whether you're starting off, through YouTube, or if you are part of a community. Even though you have
Mhm.
the blueprint in front of you, there's still questions that come up where people just it takes some time to grasp. And I always say,
Right.
like, not to overwhelm yourself, to kind of start like with a piece of the content, and then like applying that, and then coming back and applying that way. I think sometimes people just overwhelm themselves, and people
Mhm.
are also lazy. Like, they just want to be
Yeah.
given the answer too. So we're going to help all types of people with these sort of questions. So I think Tim compiled a list of questions that we've kind of seen, throughout our community, the wholesaling community, through the U, and just in general, that we see when it comes to speaking to sellers, or offers, or getting a list. That's one thing I
Mhm.
do see a lot with people getting started, is like, okay, what's skip tracing? What's where do I get this list? Does the list come skip trace already? Like, that was one of the confusing parts for me starting out, was I didn't know how to format the list. I was like, okay, so I buy this list, so I'm good, right? It's like, no, you still have to pay another extra set of money
Right.
to skip trace it. So we're gonna go over the basics that really go over people's heads, and
Mhm.
people don't really take the time to talk about. But I feel like to really like move forward, you have to understand the basics.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so we'll start off with that. I think one of the questions too is when, and we can start with, I think, pulling lists, um,
Mhm.
and actually like what that process entails. So there's different
Mhm.
areas that you can buy lists. Obviously, you can do a driving for dollars, which is free. You're just driving around, take down the addresses. You can use um, a software like a deal machine to take
Mhm.
down properties. There's other types of softwares as well. There's GeoPoint, there's PropStream, where you can get data. Once you have that data, though, you have to skip trace it. So that's like, there's you have to use a different service. Now, sometimes these sort of softwares where you do buy these lists from do come with skip traced options, but
Mhm.
typically I found pretty good success with batch. I also use REI Sift as my CRM, and they also have a skip trace option. So REI Skip, I
Mhm.
think, is also one. Um, but one of the things that does come up when you skip trace is not everybody's gonna have like a full name or a name at all, right?
Right.
And so you want to talk about that, Tim, a little bit?
Yeah. So, a lot of times, let's say it's not a full name, but you have a phone number, that pops up, and associated with that particular lead or whatever the case may be. I think it's a situation where that's where you kind of ad lib, and then you kind of was like, I've done it where it's like, hello, I'm not sure if I have the right number, but I'm calling on property, 123 Main Street. So
Mm-hmm.
I think, don't be deterred if you don't have a name on that, or you may do some more deep diving on that particular property to see if you can come up with a name. So do
Mm-hmm.
some research as well, but don't do too much research because it may not be a deal. But if you can't find anything, don't let that deter you from actually making the call or setting up your text message for that particular property. There's ways around it.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that I've learned is you have to create a process around everything.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times like we also talk about, what about the addresses that come back with no numbers? Like, what's your process? A lot of times people throw those away, or like they just ignore them, right? But
Mm-hmm.
you can create a process out of that where so this is why I love REI Sift, the CRM tool I use, because if I before I even skip trace, I always upload it into my system, because first I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I've already skip traced it in my system, or two, maybe it's incomplete, meaning it's an LLC, or it's
Mm-hmm.
like it has no name. So I'm able to save money that way by uploading it first. So once I'm able to get the clean formatted addresses, I then skip trace that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I also love about that is I'm able to also see, okay, these are my incomplete records, meaning a name is missing, an address is missing, you
Mm-hmm.
name it. So it's really important to create a process out of that. And so what I've done, and that's something I haven't really niched down to. I know some people that just specifically go after these because not many people do, and it's a way to kind
Mm-hmm.
of be like first to market out to these sellers. Is you kind of gather the specific records who don't have names or
Mm-hmm.
are incomplete, and then you kind of do some further research, so you can like filter it down where it's like, maybe I just want to target those that are in probate, or stacking that list, or you know maybe it's vacant, and then I then try to skip trace it
Mm-hmm.
myself, or I do further research. So like that's what I mean, like creating a process around it. But when you're
Mm-hmm.
getting started, there's a lot of things that you don't even have dialed down. So
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't freak out, like Tim said, when it comes to if I don't have the name, I don't have this. But I think it's important to be able to store your data somewhere. So there's Podio that's free. REI Sift, I
Mm-hmm.
think their cheapest plan is $50 a month. So I do think just having it somewhere, I think even ChargedUpReply or Marketingplex also offers that. So it's just understanding, like, hey, once you get the hang of it, you have to create a process around it. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah,
I think that's the
that's great.
biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I think when I first started, it was just call tools and then
Yeah.
Podio, and that was it. Like that's all I had for follow up and stuff. And then I
Hmm.
kind of did it old school, just making sure even though it went to Podio, I made sure I wrote it down as well and
Right.
had notes so I can go through my notes and then match it up with Podio as well. So just for backup on the follow-ups and process if there was a no name or if there was a name or if it was an LLC. If it was LLC, okay, I would designate time to try to research what those LLCs were because they could be potential buyers as well too because they may
Yeah.
have multiple properties. So
That's exactly what I've done too. Is again, I'm throwing out REI Sift. I gotta drop my
mhm.
affiliate link in there
Plug,
too,
yeah,
but
there you go.
the plug. But what's really cool is they have an owners section. So if I tap into the owners, I can filter by the city, and it'll show how many properties each owner has that's in my database. A lot of times, we talk about looking for buyers. Look in your database, because you're able to link all the properties associated with this property owner's name. A lot of times it's LLCs or trusts, but that's been a straight getaway where I'm able to just call those numbers and be like, hey, and just have that conversation with them. Maybe they're continuing, maybe they're just a straight up buyer where you can add them to your
Mhm.
buyers list,
Right.
or maybe they're just a tired landlord. They own all these properties and now they're ready to sell. So that's always a little shortcut where you can kind of just focus on that. So REI Sift is really great for that. But I completely agree, is targeting those LLCs. But again, it's just like focus on like just talking to sellers. Don't focus on that. Like once you've kind of dialed it down, then you can kind of like focus on that.
Mhm.
But the same way in like marketing, like with
Right.
text, you can without any names, but again, it'll be really hard having a conversation. With text, you can maybe create a specific campaign that is associated with people with no names. That's a little bit easier than cold calling. But I want to get through these other questions that do come up. Specifically, maybe like objections. I think there was like one specific one is how can I handle a seller's request to see my company's website?
Mm,
How have you
yeah.
kind of handled that?
Well, I've always set up like when I first started, you go down this rabbit hole of like, oh, this is the things I need to do, and then I'm not really even following what like Chris had said. I'm just still down the right YouTube kind of university rabbit hole, and carrot and spending excess money
Right.
that I really didn't need for a website for SEO and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
I did cancel that and just built like some easy website that you could do on Wix or something like that.
Right.
Now they have AI generated websites you can build in like 2 minutes. And so usually what I've said when I didn't have a website is like, hey, website's under construction, but our company has been around X amount of time, and we've done several deals in the area. So that's one way to do it, or just set up a really quick domain name through GoDaddy, and then do a Wix website really quick, or now
Right.
AI generated website really quick. But so I think those are some routes, but don't don't get flustered when someone asks for that, right? Or
Yeah.
tap into with someone that has a
I was
website,
just gonna say that. Yeah, somebody
so
always has a website. Like I
right.
think I've when I was first started calling multifamily like out here,
Mhm.
I was like, "Hey Tim, like cuz you had like a really like nice like multifamily type like website, for your the association you have with like, the family office." And so
Mhm.
that was one way where I can share it. But I've done it, it's kinda how you the confidence and, like, how you come off when you talk
100%.
to sellers. So I've been like, "Hey, we're mom and pop." Like, it's just I like to say me and my husband, I'm not gonna lie, like, when I'm talking to, especially the markets out in the South, because 'cause I'm able
Yeah.
to, like, really relate to people. So I'm like, "It's just me and my husband. We don't have a website. We're not one of those iBuyers. It's
Mhm.
just us, but, I'm happy to connect you with our title rep or, real estate attorney." That is
Mhm.
also, like, sometimes it's not even about the website, like, they just wanna, like, they're questioning your credibility, right? So
100%.
um who else can validate that
Validate,
than a
yeah.
title company, right? So if you've already have established a relationship or introduce yourself and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna be doing a ton of deals. If somebody is it alright if I share your contact information?" Um, you can do that as well. So that's always been a great way where the title company is your best friend. So if
Yeah,
they,
100%.
there was deals I was working with Chuck out in Florida, and um, a lot of the question was like, well, what do you guys do? Or what's this and that? Or even with buyers as well, with like realtors. And we would
Mhm.
just share the title company's information, and that was it. It was enough to
Mhm.
like kind of bypass that. So don't overcomplicate it. Don't think you need to create a website. I mean, at some point you will want to create that presence, brand, whatever.
Mhm.
But you can either ask somebody for a website or just keep it real. Just be like, "Hey, we're a mom and pop shop kind of thing, and we don't have a
Absolutely.
website," or your title rep. So that's always been, I've never had any issues anytime somebody asks that.
Yeah, and don't sleep on your title company or real estate attorney, or escrow company. Go out there and network with people that make sure that they are investor friendly, and you build that relationship so they can validate you when those type of questions come up, and you refer them back. And
Yeah,
because I think we get into, especially when you're new, you're so worried about the getting it locked up that you don't you go, oh, what do I do next? And you don't
right,
have things lined up. And I'm guilty of that when I first started too, but then it was all about building these relationships in other aspects of the deal.
right. No, absolutely. I think that's 100%. Um, moving into some other ones that come up, which is kind of part of the offer, is what is a letter of intent?
Mm,
That's a really common thing, and I think if you really build, again, going back to your process, if you really build out a process, is sellers like options. And right now in
mhm,
this market, you can't just offer a cash option. Um, it's not going to work for everybody. It really just depends. Some people really do just need that cash option, but in the times where they're unsure, a letter of intent, and Tim, I'm sure you can kind of elaborate on what that is specifically, especially when you kind of provide that as part of like your offer to the
Mhm.
seller.
Yeah, I think the letter intent is mostly used in commercial, but you can use it in residential as well, just to showing that you are very serious in making an offer. But also, if you gave them several options, it disallows them to pick the best option for them and see it on paper instead of really kind of explaining it over the phone. And then when you send it to them, you kind of go over all the terms and conditions that you guys kind of agreed on, and then that can go
Right.
straight to a PSA once it's signed. It makes the PSA a little bit easier.
Right, which is a purchase and sale agreement. But
Yeah.
yeah, like a letter of intent is essentially like it looks very official. It's kind of like a business kind of letter format.
Mhm.
It's non-binding. It's like
Right.
it's a kind of preliminary, I guess, commitment before moving forward to sending the purchase agreement. So a lot of times sellers are like, yeah, I'm not quite sure if that's going to work out. And then, it's like, hey, let me send over a letter of intent that provides, the different options that we can review together. And, that I think could work out. And so it's just the way we've kind of been taught is like just throwing three different options. So
Mhm.
you always have to throw the cash option there because you just never know. But you're having the seller like kind of analyze the
Mhm.
options. And then usually the other two are different forms of creative offer, whether it be
Mhm.
seller finance or subject to or whatever it is. It can even be novations or
Yeah.
you know whatever. So that makes you look really professional too, because you can kind of
Mhm.
brand it out. You can put your logo. You can make it look really nice. Not many people do that. I think we're probably seeing more people do that, but
Mhm.
that's always a great way to kind of showcase that you're an actual company and that you can that you're giving the seller options.
Yeah.
Because then you can have use that as a conversation starter of like or negotiation starter of like,
Mhm.
well, these terms don't really work out. Okay, well, what would work out? And then you kind of like
Right.
go back and forth from there.
No, I think that's a
Um,
good point too, because I think when you're in wholesaling, you almost want to rush to get the um, purchase agreement signed, right? And you
right.
know, but also you have to make the seller comfortable, and you have to be credible in your business, and this is just an added step to being more credible. It's one more step in the process, but
Hmm.
it will help you come up with your process that makes it more credible for you in your business, and all you have to do is kind of lay out to the sellers, this is kind of what we do in our process.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it looks really official. You can apply it to everything. I mean, it's we were just talking about like it's done pretty much everywhere in commercial.
Yeah. Mhm.
Because you have to look at the terms first before you look at an actual. Everyone has to be on the same page. Like how many times have we worked on something where it's like literally multiple letter of intents of like back and forth of like no no
Right.
okay we finally agree, all right, let's send over the actual agreement. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah. Let's see, what else is there? Should I consider or is it recommended to pursue fire damaged properties? I think it's listed for investment, but you can wholesale fire damaged houses.
Yeah.
I don't know if Tim,
100%.
did you close on a fire damaged home?
No, I know I made several offers, but
Yeah.
never kind of was accepted. But
Mhm.
I know that I think Elijah, he,
Elijah
he
Rubin. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Elijah Rubin, he
That's his
specializes.
niche. Mhm.
Yeah, he specializes in fire damage because what I think he was on a guest on the U before and talking about fire damage, and there's a lot of things that you could do to help the seller out in regards to getting these deals locked up, and I think there's definitely an opportunity for fire damage. So yes, to answer the question short, you can wholesale fire damage, and and it is a niche. Not everybody goes after fire damage properties.
No, because I mean, you can get an actual list from there. I mean, I remember too. We've talked about in Cali because just
Mhm.
because of all the especially,
Right.
I remember like the first one of the first lists I hit in like the Bay Area or something. It was literally right after there was like this crazy fire in Napa and
Mhm.
everything. And I was calling and like first off I got a seller who's a lawyer, so it freaked me out a
Mhm.
little bit and he was like, "Why are you calling when there's fires happening?" And I honestly that was an objection I did not know how to handle and I was just like,
Right.
"Well, I can't remember like how I responded back to that, but um you have to be prepared for those types of objections and just knowing how to frame things. But I know Cali, there's especially up in Northern California with like the crazy fires that happened a couple years ago.
Mhm.
People still haven't recovered. So I've marketed up there as well for like vacant lots with a
Yeah.
specific buyer that I've partnered up with. And yeah, people are like, yeah, I burned down a couple years ago and I haven't really taken the time to build on that. So there's definitely opportunities there, but it's like understanding the process. And so
Yeah.
what we always say is like, and I think it's the problem with a lot of people starting out. I definitely had this problem is there's so many areas that you can focus on, so many specialties that you can
Yeah.
focus on when it comes to not just real estate, but just wholesaling, right? It's like, what do you
Right.
want to target? You want to target probates, foreclosures, tax delinquent, code violations, fire damage. There's so many different areas that people get caught up. It's just
Mhm.
keep it simple. Stick to one area, become the specialist in that. And then like once you've established a really good groove, maybe close some deals, then you can kind of like move on to something. Um, but I think that's always the hardest part is like dialing things down because if you
Mhm.
have too many things moving around, it's really hard to focus and like be intentional with your process and how you go about kind of moving on and then like closing deals and stuff.
Yeah, and I think you also have to, if you target fire damage, it's a different emotional attachment too, so you have to be careful about that. It's just like almost
Oh,
like
same as
probate.
like probates. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say.
probate. So just be mindful of that because they literally probably lost their home or they have to move out for a little bit and they don't know that process. So
Also when
yeah,
texting
yeah,
too. So if you are gonna
yeah,
text,
absolutely.
there are certain lists where it's just like you do have to be intentional. Like if I'm gonna do a specific text blast for probates, I try to like my messaging is very sensitive or I don't specifically mention the owner's name because a lot of
Hmm.
times if you pull a list, the owner's information is the deceased owner. And so
Hmm.
that's gonna trigger people like this person's dead.
Yeah,
Don't ever call me again or
yeah, yeah.
and so usually for those sort of things I'll do like what's called a niche sequential. So I'll instead of doing like a cold call blast or like text blast, I'll hand dial those numbers specifically and talk to the people. And the way my intro is way different than if I were to do a general list,
Hmm.
right? So my general intro is like, hey, me and my husband just bought a rental and we're looking to buy some, a rental near a property I believe you own
Yeah.
on this street. But with the other one, it's like, it's almost similar too, but I'm like, hey, just looking to see, who's the person responsible for this property. We're looking to help homeowners who are, whatever it is. It's a little bit more geared towards, just keeping them in mind. But I never just like to say, hey, is Tim there? It's like, no,
Hmm.
Tim's dead.
Yeah.
Like, it's just then you're having to backtrack and playing defense the entire time. But I mean, if you can get through it, you can, but it's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. I mean, those are great points, and I think you just got to be a little bit more mindful when you're talking to sellers and what target you're actually targeting and marketing to. So
Right. So one of the last questions, I know we have a couple minutes left here, is what
yeah.
strategies are being used for lead generation, such as text and leads or software? Is there kind of targets you're using?
Um, I know that Well, I'm really kind of just, the traditional kind of things is, just cold calling and then using call tools for cold calling. I don't
Mhm.
do text. I kind of like Gladia and I have, created kind of like a system of stuff or where we will purchase leads, and then she you would actually do the,
I do the
texting,
acquisition.
yeah,
Mhm.
acquisition side and stuff like that. So, and my relationships are a lot on the buyer side too.
Mhm.
So we kind of, piggyback on that, but it's, usually call tools, and then I use now Airtable instead of like Podio, and then now we've learned even something new with, I think Privy, and how we
Right.
can incorporate Privy with Google Sheets, and
Mhm.
so that's been really exciting to kind of learn, and how to kinda automate that a little bit more, and,
Right.
we're just moving through and navigating that, but there's, some of the tools, I think you can speak more to the texting side of
Mhm.
things, because 'cause you've set up campaigns and you've targeted certain, different markets as well.
Yes, definitely. So, I mean, if you're starting out, the cheapest options are always gonna be, cold calling, probably,
Mhm,
is the simplest way because you just have to, like, have a phone, whether you use a dialer or, I always like to push we call it ChargedUpReply, but, like, Marketingplex, and we can definitely list, our links, but what I really like about Marketingplex, it's pretty affordable, because it has, not only can you text, but you can also it has a single line dialer, so you can make phone calls out of it. Um, Now texting is getting harder because carrier restrictions they're like knocking down the bit, like to
mhm,
restrict a lot of people because there's just been a lot of spams and people taken advantage of, and so they're trying to protect them. I guess probably not. It's probably like a on them, it's just sort of like on a higher level, aspect. So it is becoming more difficult to text. You have to use specific you can't use specific keywords. So I've really like all my texts have been written by ChatGPT. Like I'll say
yeah,
like, "Hey, I want to avoid this Twilio code. Write up something without using these words, or write up something in 160 characters asking if they want to sell um,
mhm,
without to avoid the carrier restrict or something along those lines." And so I'll tell it to write like 10 different messages. And so I just like literally copy and paste it. So that's really helped me out with that. But if you're, if your budget, if you have a bit more of a budget, direct mail is also great as
mhm,
well. But I build that into my process. So I don't just do straight up direct mail. I like cold call first, text, and then anybody who doesn't pick up out of those, I kind of like filter them down on like, okay, these people were marketed to like 3 different attempts through texting, cold calling.
mhm,
I'm just gonna send them a direct mail every month. And so that's just kind of the process. And then like this is where I was talking about like nobody picks up, or like maybe I exhausted all the numbers are dead or wrong. Then I haven't like really solidified this process yet, but typically from there is like because people give up after that, right? It's like, okay, all the
yeah,
numbers are exhausted. Maybe they'll direct mail them. But then the next step is like doing further research on like,
mhm,
okay, who is this person? So there's different facets of the lead generation that you can use and take advantage of. I mean, right now it's like iSpeed lead or PPC, and
mhm,
that's going to run you a little bit more money
yeah,
for sure. But
yeah,
I think inbound marketing is definitely the future, because it's going to be harder and harder to do outbound.
mhm,
But it's expensive, so you really have
yeah,
to allocate funds for that. But it's just figuring out what works for you. If I know a lot of people that are, six-figure months, even more, that are still cold calling because it works for
yeah,
them. So it just varies on your market. Um, but the type of softwares, like I mentioned, Marketingplex is great, really affordable, especially if you're getting started. We mentioned call tools. There's Batch Dialer. There is what other tools can you use? I mean, um, iSpeed lead, like for PPC if
mhm,
you want. There's just a very some those are like I would say like the main. ones that you can use, but there's a variety of softwares that you
Yeah,
can use, but these are the ones that
100%.
typically wholesalers are using. But I'd say just stick to one strategy and just run with it. So I think that's one thing Tim and I have kind of done is using a tool like Privy and sticking to that
Mhm.
process and like
Yeah.
be consistent with that for the next 3 to 6 months and
Yeah.
seeing what comes out of it. Because I think that's the problem. People give up too easy on their
Mhm.
strategy, and so and like don't collect the data out of it
Yeah.
either to even compare, like to see if it even worked or not. It's like how do you know if it worked after 2 weeks? Like
I
that's
know,
not
right?
enough time to validate that. So yeah, I think in terms of lead generation, that those are really great places to start.
Yeah, and we've been tweaking our process as we've gone, and, I think we've made more offers in the last, couple
We've made
weeks
hundreds of
or
offers in like this week than we have. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean that's what's
exactly,
like
so
is that's what's just thinking outside the box too, right? Like
right.
the advantages of using a tool like automation.
Mhm.
And now we're seeing how can we integrate AI into our process as well.
Right. Right.
So um that's all it is. It's always like being a business owner is like thinking outside the box of like what kind of solutions can I come up with or what kind of
Absolutely.
efficiency gains can I add for this. So that definitely that's a big one. But I know we're up on time. We hope
Yep.
you guys really enjoyed this episode. It was if you guys have any questions, we did list out the questions we discussed in the show notes. We'll make sure to drop by the links. But next week should be really great. We have a guest, actually my high school classmate
Dope.
who is in tech sales. He'll be joining us talking about getting more people of color in tech.
Mm,
That's not something that's talked about a lot.
right.
And so, him having a Hispanic background, we'll talk about like, what it's been like kind of climbing up the tech ladder, so to speak. So I'm really, really excited.
Mhm.
And it's related to sales too, especially being in tech sales. It's a very lucrative business from what I understand. And maybe
Nice.
some one thing I should consider too. I don't know, based off the numbers.
Right,
um,
right.
but we hope you guys enjoy your holiday weekend. Happy Memorial Day.
Yeah, happy Memorial
And
Day.
we'll connect next Wednesday.
Alright, peace.
All right. Peace out, y'all.